Thank you everybody for coming today. And hopefully, I think a lot of what I'm probably going to talk about this morning, most of us have probably run into at one time or another. A lot of what it is that I'm going to talk about today is something that I've observed for a long time. It kind of was born back in, I'd say 2005, 2006 timeframe, out of a national organization that approached me about putting together a program for their membership. And as we put that program together and I tried to learn more about the organization and the members of the organization and stuff like that, what I found was most of the people, while they had their own business, they didn't really want to be in business. And so I scratched my head, and part of the design requirements as I kind of put that together was, how do you teach someone who doesn't want to be in business how to run a business? And, as you start to do that, what it really does is it forces you to stay away from the standard business jargon and all the other kind of stuff. And that's really kind of where Business Growth Simplified came from. But, going through that, really one of the things that that's why I think the whole mindset thing has stuck with me for so long. Plus back when I was in the Air Force, most of you know, I spent 7.5 years in the Air Force. During my second assignment, I went through a program through the Software Engineering Institute out of Carnegie Mellon University. It was called Managing Technological Change. And that program was a 2-day workshop that we had to go through, anybody that was working on any of the projects with the SEI. And what I found through that was 2 days of nothing to do with technology and everything to do with organizational change and how do you implement organizational change. And it really it changed my professional career, because everything that I approached from that, psychological standpoint, I think, more than anything else. And understanding that the reason that things don't succeed has nothing to do with the tasks at hand, has everything to do with the people that are involved and the resistance that those people are going to put up. And so a lot of what it is that I've done ever since then always takes that into consideration. And that's really kind of what this presentation is really about. So let's get started, I guess. And the first thing I want to talk about is, when it comes to businesses, really, for the most part, the owner's mindset is going to influence every aspect of the business. Okay. This is kind of a pretty obvious statement, I think, to most of us. What's not so obvious is how just a very, very subtle change that I've kind of observed over time and kind of had an aha moment with can really completely change the trajectory of the business, just with a very slight change in the mindset with the owner. Okay. And that's all the difference between struggling for years or taking that business, and growing it, to the size that, that you can have some kind of success. The problem really kind of comes in to all of this is for that change to happen, the first thing that really needs to happen is that the owner has to have the humility to see that there's flaws in themselves, okay, and their mindset. And based off of that, they can make the necessary changes in themselves in order to have that transformation take place. I mean, this is no different than what you hear Bill Anton talk about all the time, and the whole idea of, self-awareness and, the things that Bill and Gino do with their patients on a very, or their clients, I guess, more so than anything else, on a very psychological level. But it doesn't take that kind of things for people to make those changes necessarily if they have humility in themselves and they understand. In fact, this is one of the qualifying metrics that I use when I'm talking to an owner. Do they believe that they have anything to do with the state of of affairs of their business, or do they feel like it's everybody else? Because if it's everybody else, no matter what, we have to change something in the business, which means that they're going to have to change the way that they approach. And if they're unwilling to do that, I can't really help them. Okay. Now, if they're unwilling to change, unfortunately, then, or if they don't have that humility, the journey can be really kind of long and painful. And while it's requiring much time and energy in making some of those changes, and it can be expensive. And a lot of times what ends up happening is the only way that change is going to happen is they're going to require professional counseling in order to make the changes in their life that they need to, just in order to do that. Now, everyone doesn't require that necessarily, that level of involvement, but that's what I think part of the reason why we need to have people like Gino and Bill involved in a group like this, because transition, if anything, is probably the biggest change in most owners' lives. And, you know, so you got to make sure that you've got everything kind of going on. Now, if that change doesn't occur, and this is what we want to talk about today, really is explore what is that necessary change in the mind or mind shift that an owner needs to take that literally only takes minutes. You know, if they can see the difference in that, then most people are blown away by the simplicity of the solution and what they need to do. And they can immediately start to apply the proper aspects of what they need to in their business to change the strategy and the dynamics of their day-to-day operation, if they're willing to do that. Okay. So to get started, really what we want to talk about is, you know, how simple it really is, but because owners don't do the hard work, right? The business that Bill talks about all the time, they end up getting stuck. And the reason they get stuck has nothing to do with the business. The reason they get stuck more times than not is their own, you know, their own shortcomings because of the mental barriers that they basically put up in their own head, and they can't get past those barriers. And so today what I want to talk about is really understanding what's that mindset and what impact does it have on your decision making. I think that's the critical factor. The problem is because those barriers are there, most of the time the decisions they make are the wrong decisions. They just don't realize it. You know, it's not till months or years down the road that you see the impact of a decision that you made a long time ago. When businesses go out of business, you know, or they get stuck, you know, and plateau out, it isn't because that just happened today or yesterday. It's because of decisions that were made, you know, many months or years ago that took them in that area. I want to also get some of the group's observations as we kind of talk about some of these things, because we all deal with business owners on an ongoing basis. My perspective is only one perspective. You know, a banker is going to have a different perspective. A lawyer is going to have a different perspective. A CPA is going to have a different perspective. Financial planners have a different perspective. And so I want to talk about those so that we have a better understanding of what goes on. And I want to explore the root cause problems that really get owners stuck. It's actually so simple. I'm sure when I say something, I probably said something about it in the past and people have said, you know, that's exactly what it is. And then ways that you can help owners to have their epiphany as well, just by asking a few simple questions. And, you know, the reason that I have problems with a lot of the, you guys hear me bashing trusted advisors all the time, I know, in a group. And the reason that I guess my frustration with that really kind of comes from the whole perspective of, you know, most people don't ask what the owner wants to make sure before they start providing, you know, their input and their guidance with things. And sometimes that takes an owner down the wrong path. So I want to make sure that you have these sets of things and under this underlying expectation, so that as you kind of go forward, you got a better understanding of what's going on there. So let's get started, I guess, by talking a little bit about, strategy is really what that drives the decision making for most owners. Okay. The problem that many business owners have, though, is most business owners, the reason that they had some success in the beginning is because they're very action oriented, right? You see it all the time. So they have a tendency to immediately jump to the first solution that kind of comes into their head instead of weighing out all of the different options that may be available to them. And even worse than that, potentially they're not even looking at, they're not weighing that solution against their long-term their long-term goals. And so as a result, they get off course. They take things that take them wandering aimlessly. And, if you do that for too long, eventually you start to become disillusioned with the business and what you're doing and getting up and going to work to do every day. And, before you know it, you're stuck, right? So another problem that we often have is, if you think about things, think about any kind of goal setting or any kind of time management system or anything like that. The other problem is people always talk about, you have life, professional, you got family, you have all these other aspects of your life. Okay. And as you're planning those things, a lot of times what happens is owners start to compartmentalize those things in their life, and they're setting separate goals for each of those. And there's nothing overriding that's helping them, to make those decisions. Is this the right goal in this aspect of my life or that aspect of my life? And so what ends up happening as you get down the road is you have different aspects of your life that get misaligned, and the owners feel dissatisfied with that, with everything that's kind of going on. This is that whole idea of work-life balance that we talk about all the time, right? And because those things, and they don't connect the dots in time, this is where they kind of get off track, and, they don't get any closer really to what it is that they want, and people kind of get disillusioned through all of that. So based on these things, what I'd like to kind of get an idea of is, let's discuss some situations where maybe some of you guys have seen things like this or observed these kind of instances. Anybody? Nobody?
I'll speak up some. I mean, I run into so many business owners. That's, my daily life, and probably for a number of us. And I found that, and sometimes we talk about coaching, and hey, we need to go. Many of them say, hey, I already know I'm not doing what I should be doing, but my day is so full, I don't have time to bring in any new knowledge or any information. And you're right. The typical, business owner I know would be a guy that was a HVAC guy, did all the stuff, hired his buddies, got all that stuff, but he's never done any leadership, never done any training. And it really has a terrible business out there, and it's so incredibly hard to sell. And he sort of kind of knows maybe there's something that he needs to know, but it's just tough for him to change who he is, his personality and his temperament, and all that sort of stuff to get around it. So what do I say to those guys when I say that you really need to meet my friend Dino and spend some money and some time and open your mind?
Well, Dino, if I could jump in just in under 30 seconds. Brian and I were having this conversation, and if you were to think of the two extremes, one is the business owner who is working 7 days a week, 60 hours, 70 hours, and is running around in a circle and can't seem to get off square one, and that business cannot be monetized. And the other end is the business owner who sits by the pool and looks at a dashboard and once a week has a meeting with senior executives for an hour, and the business is running through that process, which is very, very easy to sell. And I think all of us, as we go through this presentation of yours, if we're looking in the mirror, we see the same issues that you're bringing up in ourselves. and hopefully we're at least recognizing that and working towards those ways to become unstuck from a mental model position. And that's where our clients are. So it gives us some empathy to understand why they're having challenges when we all have our own challenges.
Right. Gary, looks like you raised your hand there.
I did, Dino, and pardon me for I'm sparing you the video effects this morning. They're not pretty. I'm kind of multitasking this morning,
It's okay.
but you know, your what you've been talking about so far is just so common and so characteristic of many situations that I work with in family businesses.
Oh yeah.
The
They're even worse than
compartmentalization.
businesses.
Yeah, well, yeah, the
You have the whole family.
compartmentalization
You don't-
of the
You don't
family
just
from
have the owner, you have the owner and all the family involved at the same time. So
it's a system, and I've learned to treat it almost like an ecological system.
Yep.
As if there's a change in one part, it affects the entire, you know, it affects the entire system. So that notion of ecology kind of rings true when you're talking about compartmentalization. The compartmentalization approach kind of competes with and is very dysfunctional when
Yep.
if you believe that all the different parts of your life work together in an ecological way. The other observation that I had is that you know, when you were talking about the perspectives that people bring to problems,
right.
probably the client that I've worked with that had the most financial success in exiting a business, selling out to a private equity firm, was so obsessed with the financial details that he overlooked everything else that we advise people on when they're planning an exit. It was a remarkably successful financial exit and a
Right.
disaster in almost every other way,
Every other area.
including a family who continued to work for the firm, and including his continued role as a board member, including his sense of satisfaction, or what actually it turned out to be remorse after exiting the business. So those perspectives and those mindsets that someone takes into a transition are clearly so important for a successful outcome.
Yep. And that's a lot of what it is that we try to do with people is understanding. I mean, that's the whole point of the book, is there's more than one aspect that influences, you know, a business's success and business growth. You have to have a balance between all of those things. But, you know, as I'm going to show you as we kind of go through this, the first thing is you got to know what it is that you want, so that as you're balancing all those other aspects, you make sure that they're pointing you in the direction that you want to go from a personal standpoint, and not just what you want personally, but what you want in your life in general. So that's a good transition, I guess, to get back to the presentation, is where, you know, so we need a method really that, you know, takes into consideration that, like, you know, balance of life that we talk about all the time, you know, that work-life balance. But there has to be something even bigger than that. The problem with when we talk about work-life balance is you're saying those two things are different, you know, and they're separate, and they are, but they're part of a bigger whole, which is you as a person, right? And so you have to really first start from that standpoint. And that's really kind of where we start from, is what do you want from your life? Okay. If you need to understand that and then set goals that take you in the direction that give you what it is that you really want from your life. So a little different perspective, this really gets people uncomfortable when we start putting them through the process, because this requires that they look inward first. Okay. And most people don't want to do that. Why? You know, the reason that we make ourselves busy a lot of times is because we're trying to get out of our own head, right? I really don't want to think about that crap because it really is driving me crazy. But if you don't do that, then if you feel that discomfort internally, the reason that you feel that discomfort is I'm doing one thing, but I want something else, right? And it's that, you know, so that inward, what we're really looking for is not just what do I want, okay? It goes deeper than that. And it means what emotions do I want to experience? And understanding what those emotions or those feelings that I'm looking for above and beyond why I think I want those things that I want, okay? And so the way we really look at it is, what's your life's dream? That's the question. And this, most of us, if you've worked with the financial planner in the back, this is the same kind of approach that a financial planner typically will take you through too. What is it that you want to be able to do when you retire, okay? Or when you're done, you know, and why are we going to create this pile of money for you out here so that you can live the life that you want? It's really no different than that. The difference is if you have a business and you grow the business the right way, it doesn't take you 20 or 30 years to get there. Okay, you can do it in 3 to 5 years if you set it up, but you have to start with the end in mind, right? I mean, to go to right, 7 habits of highly effective people, right? That's what step 2 is, start with the end in mind, right? So that's what we're doing here. Yeah,
may I raise my hand?
Sure.
You and I had this conversation. I've had this conversation with most people I've had lunch with, but you know, we define exit as monetization and succession as identifying those who will take on the different task of the entrepreneur and be able to identify them, you know, psychologically, and then what the traits are, the process procedures, and then transition being that personal transformation that the entrepreneur has to go through to miss the isms. And the isms are, you know, sex, drugs, alcohol, spending habits on, you know, race cars and airplanes and horses and boats and all the things that distract them from what this dream is and really being in touch with that. And it's,
Right.
it may be the most critical portion. I'm glad you're bringing this up because it may be the most critical portion of what we can do with the business owner. And we have many members on our council who specialize in that. So thank you for bringing up that. I think it's a mission critical piece.
Absolutely. Thanks for your observation. So the problem is, a lot of times what happens is people do this inward thinking. They say, I want to time with the family. I want a big house. I want a fancy car. I want to take vacations and that side of things. So, so we have a tendency to set goals as things that we want, instead of, when we have those things, what we really want is the feeling, okay, and the emotion that we experience when we believe that we'll have an experience if we have those things. Okay, we hear people talk about this stuff all the time, right? We're a marketing driven, society. Everything is about you want, and that's what causes us to get kind of out of and get dissatisfied with life. It's not the what, it's the emotion that you want from it. And in fact, years ago, just as I was getting out of the Air Force, that was when I first was introduced to Tony Robbins, and I had the Personal Power was his original program, I think, that he had decades ago. And Tony talks about ends and means goals, okay? And the difference between those really have a huge impact on your thinking, okay? ends goals are the emotions that we want. Okay. They're the things we want to feel because they make us feel good. Okay. And the things that we want really are the means goals. Okay. We believe that having those things will give us those emotions and those feelings that we want. So the important part when you're doing that inward perspective, what it really comes down to is you got to prioritize your emotions. Okay. So you need to understand why you behave the way that you do and what positive emotions are you looking or are you going after by acting that way. Okay. If you can figure those things out and prioritize them in the order that they of importance that they have to you, it makes it a lot easier for you to understand what the things are. And then all of a sudden, all the things that you're doing that just, you hate to do all come into perspective, because it's like you shouldn't be doing any of that stuff because it's not leading you in the direction that you want. This is the first step in the Business Growth Simplified process that we take people through. And if they don't want to go through this, we can't help them with all the other stuff because we know where they're going to end up. Okay. So what we do is we force owners to do the hard work that Bill talks about all the time. Now, if they have deep-seated emotional kind of stuff that's getting in the way of all of this stuff, we can't help them with that. And that would be a definite area where I would say you need to go talk to Bill. Okay. But in most cases, most people, you can get them to understand this stuff and to begin. It's hard for them to really organize and begin to go there. But once they understand what their why is, it makes it so much easier to begin to set the right goals and objectives for the business long-term so that it starts to move them in the right direction. Okay. Because the reason that most business owners, why did they open the business in the first place? Okay. The belief that they had was they thought if they owned the business, the connection that they made was that they could have independence and financial freedom. But how many owners that have independence and financial freedom? Most of them are chained to their business and they can't go anywhere, right? And if you don't get that right, 10, 15, 20 years go by. And, this is really kind of why owners get stuck in their business. Okay. Because it really starts from something very basic. I told you it was a simple idea or a simple strategy that could change the way that a business owner. The problem is when most business owners started their business, before they started their business, what were they or what did they do? They were an employee. Okay. The problem is they never learned to be a business owner. They never took the time. They didn't realize that was even something that you needed to do. So you were an employee before you owned your business. So you apply an employee mentality when you start the business. And as a result of that, you build a job instead of a business. And I think most people in this group would say 9 chances out of 10, that's really what it is that you see, because we have this conversation with business owners all the time. You really don't have a business, you have a job, okay? And I don't think anybody would, Brian, this is probably the conversation that you have. Nobody wants to buy your job. I mean, they can spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars less and do it from the ground up and, get to the same place that you're at. So why would they want to do that? In order to really have a business requires all the necessary things to operate a business that need to be built around it. So, applying the business model canvas to make sure all the different aspects of the business are in place and that you have all those things and all the systems necessary in order to make sure that all this stuff functions the way that you do. Most business owners never learn this stuff. I mean, you'd be surprised how many people go through our masterclass. They've never seen this before, and they've been in business for 15, 20 years. Okay. The result really of doing it from this standpoint is most business owners, like I said, they build a job for themselves And unfortunately, what they end up doing is they work for a paycheck week after week instead of building, and that's never going to give you independence and financial freedom. Okay. What they really need to focus on is building an income generating asset, which is a completely different monster. Okay. And that means that you have to learn to be a business owner, you know, as a part of that process. Okay.
Hey, Dino, can I interrupt you a second? Ask a question.
Sure, John.
How does this apply to consultants? Yourself, you know, basically I'm a consultant, you know, basically I'm a worker in my business because, you know, that's what I designed to do. But a lot of us are consultants. And so you do work in your business. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
What you have to understand in those situations, John, is you're making because this, I mean, there's nothing wrong with this. I've had clients that have started with me. We've gotten down the path and they realize this really wasn't what they wanted. My most successful client is that way. He's a home designer. He draws plans for a living, but he learned how to be a business owner, and he built, you know, a $40-50 million business around him to do all the things that he didn't like to do, and put all the right people in place to manage the business so that all he needed to do was the things that he loved doing.
Right.
Drawing plans and working with investors. Okay. So he had a role in his business, but he became a business owner. Consultants the same way. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do with Business Growth Simplified. I've taken the process. I can teach other consultants and business, you know, and coaches to apply our process and get the same results that we do because it's a system that I apply. That's all, you know. In fact, we've done that earlier this year. I have people. Now it's just a matter of cranking the marketing engine up so that we have enough people going through the program that want coaching assistance so that those people can be deployed in that way, or that we have enough classes that, you know, people want to get into that, you know, those other they'll facilitate those other classes. You know, if I can get that cranked up, I'll have more than enough money and can retire. I'll never stop doing it because, like you, John, why do you do it? Because you enjoy it. Exactly. So, I mean, if you enjoy what you do, you don't want, but the problem in a lot of cases, if we didn't put the business around us and other people in chairs or whatever, something happens to us, you know, we're in a high risk situation, and most of us haven't really thought about it that way. And a lot of owners haven't thought about it that way too. I mean, you don't know how many owners I talk to that say, you know, what happens if you get hit by a bus, you know, and it's like, well, I have life insurance. It's
Who
like,
cares?
well, here's the problem though.
I'm kidding.
What if you don't get killed? Then what? I mean, I'm a perfect example. When I had my stroke, it was like, oh man, I had taken the proper action. At least it cost me more for my disability insurance on a monthly basis than it does for my life insurance. Okay. You know, but I took care of those things, and a lot of business owners don't do that kind of stuff. So
Sure.
Anybody else have any questions or anything? Everybody's seen some of this stuff before. Am I talking about stuff that it's like, oh yeah, I see that every day? You know, it's like, so how do we fix that stuff? Or what should I be on the lookout for? Or that kind of.
Dino, one of the things I've noticed, and just recently, is I got a contract with a gentleman that's in automation of multifamily units.
Okay.
And it's interesting because he obviously has these symptoms, and that he hired me, but at the same time, he wants to micromanage what I'm doing.
Right.
So, you know, and so it's as typical of somebody that is in the business, is managing every little detail of everything that goes on, and can't let it go. So
Yep. Well, when somebody's getting started, that's one of the observations. That's
Right.
the problem that I think, again, I'm a worker, so I was an employee, so I have to learn how to do that. No, you have to learn what somebody that does that should do so that you know what to monitor and how to monitor their performance, and then you need to delegate and let them do their job. And if you don't learn how to do that, you're still, in the case that you just described, John, the business will never become any bigger than it is because the owner's touching everything all the time, and it can only expand as much as the span of control of that owner is capable of doing. So they will always plateau and it'll never go any higher than that.
Yeah, and he is a startup, and so it actually can't go anywhere until he starts letting
Until he
go
gets
or-
going, yeah, until he starts letting go. Well, maybe some of this stuff will help that I'm going to talk about now. So where does all of this? Many are probably familiar with Robert Kiyosaki that wrote the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I don't know how this happened, but by accident, a box showed up on my porch step about a decade and a half ago, and it had the book in it, The Cash Flow Quadrant. This is his book that really kind of talks about the difference between what he calls employee and self-employed mentality, and what true business owners really are. Okay. And in it, there's this icon that he's got down here on the front of the book or whatever. I want to talk about that. It's the difference between owners and employee perspective. Okay. This is one of the things that I point out to people all the time when I'm starting to when they can't make that shift in the mindset to understand, on the right side, on the left side of this thing, you have the employee, right? I work for somebody else, or what most small business owners are, self-employed. Okay. And then on the right side are where you have the guys that are really successful. They're the business owners. Business owners don't work in their business. Okay. They own the majority of the stock or all the stock in their business, and they have a team in place that run that business for them. Okay. That's the mentality shift. Okay. And then investors are the same thing, but they're investing, and they're putting money only in many different areas. Business Growth Simplified is designed to move people and move business owners from the S quadrant to the B quadrant. Now, everyone's not going to want to make this shift, so this is not for everybody. Okay, but we want to at least have the conversation, because the problem is most business owners don't understand the difference even between those two things. Okay, and so we have some short videos and articles and stuff like that talk about this stuff, just to get people where this really kind of came from. And the aha moment that came for me is we volunteer in a lot of the startup organizations, and the inventors notoriously fall in this category, and they want somebody else to do all of this stuff for them. And then they never get their idea off the ground because they won't make this shift, and they don't understand. Investors aren't interested in something different than you are interested in, and they're not going to invest in you unless you understand that. And so understanding how to communicate the right side and the left side to communicate is very important here. Okay. So Business Growth Simplified really kind of helps to understand the why, right? First step in the process. Then we analyze the business to really understand, do you have all the parts that you need in order to validate what it is that you think you want to offer, and the idea that you have that you want to offer or that you are offering. A lot of businesses that have been up and running for a long time, that's part of the problem. They never vetted their product or service well enough in the marketplace so that they can scale it. Okay. And then developing and putting all of the stuff around it to build a revenue engine and systematically scale that business around all of that stuff. So this is kind of the way that, our process really kind of works. And then because of what our topic is really today, where I want to really kind of focus is what do we do in this why area? Well, in the why area, we have two tools that we use. Figuring out the why is critical because it drives all the planning of everything else for the business. So we use the personal goal assessment is like 27 questions. People when they fill this form out, if they're open-ended questions, they're like, holy crap, I've never thought about some of this stuff before, or it's been years since I thought about all of this. The whole point of this exercise is to find the fire again. Why did you start the business in the first place? What did you think that it was going to give you if you do that? And then we have a do-it-yourself challenge on the member site you can sign up for. It's free. It basically takes you through the same process. And, you know, by daily bite-sized chunks to really try and figure out what is it that you want from your life, okay? And so that we understand how do we need to plan your business to most effectively support the life that you want, okay? Goes back to having that emotional feeling that you want, okay? Once we understand what you want out of life, then it becomes much easier for us to say, okay, then how do we build what we call a self-sustaining business, okay? It's what we're really doing is we're creating a absentee owner business in the process, okay, here. Now, back to John Hammerlink's question. If you're if you love what you do, you're not building this systematic process, okay, and this revenue engine, you know, this machine, a self-sustaining business so that you can retire. You're doing it so you don't have to worry about all the other stuff, okay? You're building an asset that will generate, so I don't have to get up and go to work. Something does happen to me, or, you know, you never know when something's going to happen that's going to, you know, it may not even happen to you, you know? If our spouse found out that they had cancer and it was terminal, would you want to work? No, you want to spend time. Well, but you're tied to the business and you can't do. Those are the kind of situations that we bring up with people when they say, well, I don't know if this is really for me or not, because, you know, they haven't thought about those things themselves sometimes. And so once we've gone through this process, then we have layers of strategic objectives that we kind of build from that. So at the top of this thing, once I understand, well, here's what I want out of my life. Okay, well, if that's what I want out of life, then what does the business strategy need to be? And how do we need to build the business in a way that supports that life that you want for yourself? Once we understand that, that typically is something that we can handle and we can get done in the next 3 to 5 years. That's why I talk about that 3 to 5 year timeline all the time. Then
Dina, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Now, if I understood you correctly, I know that you charge clients for this, but you said on the member site, our members can go ahead and access this at no cost. Is that what you said?
Well, the tools that we have, these two tools, this
Yes,
is a
sir.
paid tool because this actually has consulting. There's an hour to 2 hour consulting session that goes along with that. So
Got
we
it.
charge $2.99 for that. But the do-it-yourself, the Find Your Fire again, that's free for anyone. That's not just for that's a giveaway that we give on the site. Because typically once somebody goes through this and they have all the aha moments, then the next thing they want to do is start fixing the business to support that. They want to go through this process. So once the business strategy is kind of outlined, it becomes real easy. Then we just basically say, all right, what can we get done in the next 12 months? And that becomes your business plan. And then breaking that down further, if this is what we're going to do in the next 12 months, then the revenue engine, what are the things that the revenue engine needs to do, right? And then from that, you can break down and say, well, this is what we should see happening then on a day-to-day basis. And now I can create accountability at all levels of the organization and measure that on a daily and a weekly basis without any problem whatsoever. We do this all the time with clients. This is the process that we use. The other thing that this does is it solves a compartmentalization problem that we had before, because the business is designed with the life goal at its center, right? This is what you want from life, and we're going to make sure that this business can generate enough income for you that you can live that life. If part of that means that you want to continue to work and operate in the business, fine, that's okay. But if something were to miraculously happen tomorrow, you could go and do whatever that was that you wanted and still have that income being generated as a result of all of this kind of going on. Okay, so the compartmentalization really kind of goes away.
Hey, Dino.
Yeah, Brian.
Hey, yeah. And on that last slide you had up there, which is really great. And you went earlier and you talked about that life element. We say, hey, what do we want to get out of life? And there's all these different elements about our lives, as you know, but then
Right.
do you go directly back to business strategy only, or do we talk about, I mean, this looks like all the daily objectives about your business part. Is there any conversation after that about the things you do with your life, outside of
Oh
the
yeah, no,
totally
absolutely.
focused on that?
There's
It seems
there's
very
absolutely-
yeah.
there's a tool that we use for this, and it's pretty simple. It's like one page. It's basically, all right, well, if you want that, if that's the life that you want, how much income, that's why I say it's similar to what a financial planner does. So we say, okay, well, if this is what it is that you want out of life, how much money do you need so that you could just go do that and you never would have to worry about anything else? And they say, well, I need, $100,000 a year. Okay, well, if you need $100,000 a year, what is the net income on average that you typically get from the business? We net, somewhere between 15 and 20%. Okay, fine. Well, 15% into $100,000 in net income a year tells me now this is how big the business needs to be grown. And now I have a target. I need to grow the business to this size with a management team in place and all of the things that I need. So see, that's the change in strategy that happens. Instead of just trying to grow towards, well, I want to make it, we did 2 million this year, I want to do 3 million next year. No, I want to do 2 million this year with a management team in place, because now I don't have to work ever again if I don't want to. And I'm going to put on the management team's back to grow it to 3 million, 5 million, 10 million beyond that point. Okay. Completely different mindset, but most business owners aren't thinking that way, because they're thinking, like you said, how many, I got to go out and I got to go fix an AC unit today because I got to pay me a paycheck on the end of the thing. Completely different mindset as a result of that. And this is what helps us to start to get them to think more like an owner and less like a self-employed.
Thank you.
So, anybody else? So obviously, if we solve the compartmentalization problem, we've probably got, and typically we find people begin to get better life balance as a result of this. So most what we find almost consistently is owners become better focused because they see the why and why they're doing what they do every day when they get up and they go to work. This is why I call it find the fire again, because all of a sudden they're recharged like they were when they first started the business. Okay. And when things get tough, because they have a greater purpose that they're working for, and the reason that they're doing what they're doing with their business, it helps them to face those challenges, so that instead of giving up like they used to, they're willing to try and figure out how to get over that wall that's in front of them, because they see what they want on the other side. And as a result of getting over this wall, it's going to help me to get there even quicker. And so in a nutshell, that's really kind of what it is that we do. And that's what we've been doing for 15 years. Like I said, people go through this process, and they say it all the time. I mean, if you look on the website that Michael mentioned earlier, you'll see a lot of the business owners that have been through the new masterclass that we released, that we're teaching now and stuff like that. And, time and time and time again, owners say, you know, this was life changing. You know, it completely changed my life as a result of what we learned here through this program. So questions, comments? That's all I have today.
Yeah, I got, hey, Dino, what's the best way for us to take that first step with our clients regarding what you've got out there? A lot of times we're talking about something entirely different, but we know they need this. Do we give them your book? Do we give them a link? Do we tell them, hey, they're an idiot and they need to really rethink their lives? I'm just kidding about that last sentence. But
Well, it really
what's the
kind of
best intro?
depends. Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, it really kind of depends on the person.
Mm.
You know, you have the relationship typically with those people and know them better than we do at that point, you know. So, you know, if you can at least assess to understand why is it, you know, is it because they're focused on the wrong thing, or is it because the business is just broke? You know, I mean, if the business is just broke, you know, it may not be, they're going to need to do this too, but they may need to really look at the revenue engine, or, you know, do you understand what stage that you're at? And do you understand the things that you need to focus on as a result of being in those stages? So, you know, that's why we have the 3 assessments that are really part of the process, to really get people to understand what it is that they need to do and why they need to focus where they need to focus. It's just before we start doing any kind of long-term strategic planning, we got to make sure that they've got, you know, they understand what it is they want from their life first.
Gotcha. And I lost my paper copy of what you had, but I noticed that you have one that's free on Kindle for all of us that are part of Amazon. So that's
Yeah,
very
you can get
generous.
the books
Not very
are
profit wise, but very generous of you. So
I mean, I've offered to anybody, because what we found is most people, they read the book and it's like, man, this makes perfect sense. And this seems so simple. I want to do this. So, you know, and the books don't cost me anything. So anybody that would want to give those books out because they think, let me know. And, you know, I'll get you a stack of books, because we got a case of them sitting on the shelf because we send them out. Or the other thing is make an introduction, you know, and I'll send them a signed copy of the book. I don't have a problem with that either. That's another good one for us to do as well.
This is Michael Valdez, if I may say something here.
Sure.
One of the things that we've talked about today is helpful. I know that Dr. Anton has what he calls the, I always want to call it the Nero, but it's the Neo. I know Dino has another number of assessments, and I think a number of the members have things that are assessments like that. And I think what I've been hearing as I've been having lunch with everyone is we really want to figure out how to talk to entrepreneurs and clients in a way of using the group's talents and skills and assessments. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. And I know that will be a conversation that we continue to have and figuring out what we can do. I see about 19 people on here. I'm sure there's a couple other questions. We've got about 4 more minutes left before we end the session. Anyone else have anything that wasn't clear or that they'd like to talk about in terms of what they've seen with their own clients?
Dino, I have to tell you, this is one of the most valuable things I have had an opportunity to consume in a long time. And you helped to close the loop and tie some loose ends for me this morning. You know, in particular, a lot of times when I'm doing transition planning with a client, I have this tendency to be a nerd about it, and I'm, you know, zeroing in on, you know, when does my client want to retire, what's the total after-tax income he wants from all sources. And I've been trying to add the element of what's going to be the purpose for that for the retirement for my client when he reaches that end. And you've added something that I hadn't really thought about, is, you know, getting that client to the point where his company is self-managing so that he can have a life now that really just, when he leaves his company, it's just a matter of changing the form of the asset, because he's already living a life that is that doesn't require him to be in the office. Because if he is, and we had this happen in our family business, my father died. He was executive VP of the company, and a few years later, my uncle contracted lung cancer, which he beat. But the company as a separate asset didn't exist. We had to keep my uncle in the saddle long enough to be able to sell the company, so that the asset could be converted. But I think back to what they could have had in the form of a better family life if they had just retasked the business and made it a separate asset rather than something that required their presence. So thank you very, very much.
It's mindset. It's completely mindset. I mean, listen, I talked to John Brown directly. This is years ago. Okay. Because my philosophy's been, we have the 5 standard ways that we say that you exit a business. And it's like, no, there's a 6th one. And the 6th one is to hold a self-sustaining asset. I mean, it may still transition, but it may stay in the family, because it's like, why would I sell? It's like cutting the head off a golden goose. Why would I sell an asset that I have total control for to get a pile of money that I have to go invest now in companies that I have no control over whatsoever in order to generate my income for me? It doesn't make sense to me, but that's why they probably didn't want to come back and say, yeah, we want to partner up with Dino, because, people don't want to do the transition planning. They don't have to anymore. So Bill, I think Bill raised his hand, had a question too.
First of all, I think what you did was really extremely valuable, Gino. It's really the best presentation I've heard in a while. On the other hand, I have this observation that, you're all smart people, and I'm a fairly smart person too. And if I wanted to just start doing M&A without any preparation, and I just did it over and over and over, I could probably get to about 60% of what the experts do, but I'm
Right.
never going to be the expert. Yet everyone, because of the nature of psychology, feels that they have the skill to deal with emotions. The way you described what I do was, if they have real problems, I'll refer them to Bill. Well, I can tell you that 95% of my clients are higher functioning than most of us emotionally and psychologically. They're seeing me because they want more out of
More out of
themselves.
life.
Excuse me. And they represent that it takes a certain level of skill. Yet rarely do I hear the need to bring in somebody with that expertise early in the process. What I hear is that we can simulate it. We can pretend that we understand psychological functioning, neuroscience, and you preface it by saying, well, the people that are really sick, I send a bill, but the ones that are almost there, I work with. I think it's a way of deluding oneself. And so my recommendation is that the provider, the person that's helping the business person outside of their scope of competence, should get help themselves so that they can become more self-aware and be more effective with their clients. So that's my 2 cents.
Right. No, and that's a good point. I mean, I recommend your stuff all the time, Bill. It's just, as well as I do, most people, it's like, no, I don't need that stuff. And it's like, well, you really do, but start here at least. So.
Well,
But you're right. I mean, I can.
That what you just said is an opportunity for a coach to help you manage those situations where they say, I don't need that.
Right.
But the curiosity isn't there. And if that missing piece could exponentially increase your business beyond what you could imagine is possible.
Right.
So that's my point. Yeah.
And Bill, I think you make a great point that all of us have roles that can be instrumental. The key is to have a thirst for collaboration and figure out how we can best do that.
Yeah. Like I would bring Gino in for the business part. I wouldn't try to simulate or what he's doing, even though I could listen to the presentation and I could fake it with a client and say, well, I'm going to charge you for this too. But I'm not really interested in that. I'm interested in staying within the scope of my expertise and partnering with people that have complementary expertise. So, but that being said, I think what you did an amazing job. In fact, I even thought I'd like to get the video and put it on my website because it was so good. So
Well,
we'll end on a positive note.
we're recording it, and I
I know.
already asked Amy. I told Amy, I said, I want that because I'll probably edit it down so that it's
No,
on.
you did an excellent job, and you really did. From a business point of view, it's like you're almost there. Yeah. That was my observation. Yeah. Like
I'm working on it.
you're really
I'm working
close
on it.
to the kind of partnerships that could really make your company great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.